Okay, we're going to get started. This is session number 14 in the book of Isaiah. Again, I'm going to address people that are watching online. I don't know if there's anybody that's not part of the group that watches. I suspect there might be. If you're watching one of these videos and you're not part of the cross country fellowship group, we would invite you to join us. We'd love to have you join us. If you'd like to join us, just post a comment and I'll get back with you and get you hooked in so you can call into our Zoom meeting. And if you have a prayer request and you would like the cross country fellowship members to pray for you, put in a comment. We'll pray for you. We like to pray. We like to pray because God answers our prayers. All right. The book of Isaiah is full of prophecies about all kinds of things. And I've been astounded as I've really gone deep into Isaiah, much more deeply than I've ever gone before. I've read through it 30 times. I don't know how many times, lots of times. But the things I'm finding on this trip through it, studying it, are just astounding. And 2 weeks ago, we learned about Egypt and Assyria, that they're both going to turn to Jesus when Jesus returns on earth to be the king. Both of them were staunch enemies of Israel. Both of them were.
And each other.
Yeah. But God says there's going to be Israel in the middle and Assyria in the north and Egypt in the south, and they're all going to worship Jesus. Mm-hmm. What an amazing prophecy that is. Last week, we learned about Tyre's judgment, and I want to just review that just briefly. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel prophesied about Tyre's judgment. The full prophecy said that Tyre would be destroyed and that it would be used only to dry nets. There was not going to be anything left. Mm. However, we learned from Isaiah's prophecy that Tyre's judgment came in two phases. The first phase would be Nebuchadnezzar, who was going to destroy the city that was on the seashore. And it happened. It happened just as was prophesied by Isaiah. In fact, as we talked about it, we learned that Nebuchadnezzar besieged the city of Tyre for 13 years. Mm. This is amazing. And Tyre had been a city for hundreds of years. It was a long time. So after the first phase of judgment on Tyre, Isaiah prophesied that there would be 70 years of inactivity where Tyre was just not doing anything. And then they're going to be rebuilding during that 70 years. And then at the end of the 70 years, they would again begin commercial activities where they would be again going around the known world, getting goods, providing goods and service, food and other kinds of things to the people around them in the Middle East. And what we learned is that this 70-year period matched the 70 years that Judah and Jerusalem would have to wait before they could return to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. And so what happened, God used Tyre to be the supplier of stuff for the exiles that were returning to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple in Jerusalem. And that's how God works. That's how God works. He's orchestrating things all over the world, even right now. And we're too close to it, so it's hard for us to see it. But he's orchestrating things happening around the world that we don't understand. And we won't understand it probably until we get to glory. But he's making it ready for his time of judgment. Mm-hmm. That's just the way he's working. And then we learned last week that the phase 2 of Tyre's judgment, as prophesied by Ezekiel and Jeremiah, came with Alexander the Great, who came much later after the Persians. So Babylon was taken over by the Persians. The Persians went 100, 120 years, And then Greece became ascendant under Alexander the Great. And he came and he used the rubble left over from Tyre's city on the seashore to make a causeway out to the rebuilt city on the water. And he completely destroyed the city of Tyre, and it's never been rebuilt since then. And it's literally rocks where they spread their nets. All the prophecies about Tyre were fulfilled exactly as God said they would be. So today we're going to study Isaiah chapter 24 and a little bit into chapter 25. And again, this is very interesting prophecy, very interesting. The subject of this prophecy is judgment of the whole earth. And honestly, I've read this many times before. I must not have paid any attention to it. I didn't see it. I didn't recognize how important this was. I've always thought that this kind of prophecy was only in Revelation, but it's not. Clearly, I was wrong. It's not. Now, remember, we studied Revelation and all the judgments in Revelation, and now Isaiah is saying, kind of on a more general level, Revelation gives very specifics. On a general level, Isaiah is giving the same kind of prophecy as Revelation. So we're going to first start in Isaiah 24, verses 1 to 3, if someone would be willing to read that. Isaiah 24, first 3 verses, 1 through 3.
Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste, distorts its surface, and scatters abroad its inhabitants. And it shall be, as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the creditor, so with the debtor. The land shall be entirely emptied, utterly plundered, for the Lord has spoken this word.
Wow.
Wow.
That's pretty strong.
Empty the earth.
This is a prophecy concerning the time called the day of the Lord, which is the time of God's specific judgments that are more detailedly described in the book of Revelation. And it's a future time. God hasn't done it yet, but he's going to do it. And this prophecy really clearly matches what's prophesied in Revelation. And we're going to look into Revelation to see the details. I thought this was a good time for us to jump back and forth between Isaiah and Revelation for details, just to remind us what we studied in the past, and what God has prophesied about what he's going to do to judge the earth. And it starts out here in verse 1 of Revelation 24. The ESV says, behold, the Lord will empty the earth and make it desolate. The details of this are in Revelation. So let's go to that. And we're going to look at the pieces of the 3 judgments, the seal, trumpet, and bowl judgments. And we're going to start in the seal judgments. And we're going to go to Revelation chapter 6, verses 3 and 4. And does someone want to read that, or do you want me to read it?
When the land opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one, and its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. How far?
That's for now, that's enough. This is a judgment that will cause people to be killed by warfare. And we know that people die in warfare. Look what's happening in the Ukraine and in Russia right now.
It's a mess.
It's a horrible mess. Okay, now let's go to the third seal, Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6.
Kathy,
When he opened the,
oh, go ahead.
okay, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine."
So this judgment involves famine and food shortages. If you think about it, our country is very vulnerable to this. We are totally dependent on trucks for food. I mean, where do we get our food? We go down to the grocery store. Here in Eaton, we go to Walmart. Well, there is a Kroger, but we call it a Crow ghetto. It's really small and dirty.
It's nasty.
It's nasty. So we go to Walmart, and it's not much better. It's about half a notch above. So anyway, we go to Walmart, and that's where we buy our food. We don't have a lot of choice in Eaton. It's a small town.
That is the only choice.
But if there weren't trucks bringing food in nearly every day, we'd get really hungry.
Plus, the government's been making farmers destroy their crops.
Well, it gets complicated because they grow crops around here, hundreds of thousands of acres, but they're growing soybeans
And corn.
and
All government subsidized.
government subsidized. That's why they grow them, because the government pays them to, and a lot of it goes into fuel, not food, which is sad. But anyway, let's get into that.
But again,
Bananas are coming from South America.
we're subject to trucking. I mean, if you run out of fuel or other critical trucking commodities, there would be great food shortages, and people would be panicking, actually.
Yeah, people that lived in really crowded cities would be especially vulnerable because they can't even grow out and plant a potato.
Right. At least we have land here. We can grow gardens here. But okay, next one. Revelation chapter 6, verses 7 and 8.
Kathy, you get that one.
Okay. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth.
Wow.
So this judgment kind of includes some of the previous judgments, but this time there's a percentage of the population mentioned, 1/4. Currently, we have about 8 billion people on the earth. 1/4 of that's 2 billion. That's a lot of people. But remember, we got to go back to what we just read about in Isaiah chapter 24, verses 1 through 3. It says the earth's going to be empty. So let's go to the trumpet judgments, and we'll start out in Revelation chapter 8, verse 7. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth, and 1/3 of the earth was burnt up, and 1/3 of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up.
Yeah. Wow.
Nuclear.
Notice the
Yeah.
judgments will become more and more severe as they're revealed.
Yeah.
Could be nuclear. It could be just God. And I think that that's more likely what it is, although one would think of nuclear when you hear this. But you notice, it doesn't say anything about percentage of people dying, but something like this happening, lots of people are going to be dead. Okay, Revelation chapter 8, verses 8 and 9.
Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea became blood, and 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed.
Sounds like a volcano.
It does, doesn't it?
A big volcano. Yeah.
Obviously, the people in the ships that are destroyed are going to die.
Yeah.
But you can imagine lots of people,
This
people
is-
living on the seashore.
This is just devastating.
Yeah, horrible devastation. Okay.
Well, and all of the underground volcanoes, or under earth or underwater volcanoes too. I mean, that's,
Well, look what happened in Indonesia when there was a volcano that made that big slide, and how many people, I don't know if it was a million, but
No, and that was 350,000 people died. And in 2004, when they had that
yeah,
tsunami.
tsunami caused by an uplift.
the tsunami.
Yeah,
And that was just water.
that was just what, yeah. Okay, Revelation 8 verses 10 through 11.
Sorry. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter.
Wow,
That sounds like
wow,
a meteorite.
yeah. Okay, Revelation chapter 8 verses 13 and 19. This is a little bit long.
Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year were released to kill a third of mankind. The number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. And this is how I saw the horses in my vision, and those who rode them. They wore breastplates of the color of fire and sapphire and sulfur. And the heads of the horses were like lions' heads. And the fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. By these three plagues, a third of mankind was killed, by the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound.
Mm. Mm. You know, right now, even as we're talking, there are four angels who are bound by the river Euphrates, and they're bound there waiting for this moment. Because it says, release the four angels who are bound in the great river Euphrates. So the four angels who have been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year.
Just said that.
God is setting all this stuff up, and it will happen exactly as he said it was going to happen. And this is, you know, the number of troops is 200 million in the way that we count. 200 million. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. And so now, if you just count the quarter of the population being killed, and now a third of the population being killed, we're over half the population. And that doesn't even include all the other people dying from all the other judgments that don't have numbers. So now we get into the bowl judgments. We're moving to Revelation chapter 16. So if you've got your Bibles open or your iPhone's open, whatever, go to Revelation 16, and we're going to start in verse 3. And I'll read the first one. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse. And every living thing died that was in the sea. Talk about an ecological disaster. And it's a judgment. It's a judgment of God. Okay, Revelation 16:4. Someone read that.
The third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. Then I heard the angel in charge of the waters say, "You are just in these judgments, you are, and who you who are and who were the Holy One, because you have so judged."
Mhm.
How far?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's enough. Yeah. So you make all the springs of water blood. That means the only thing that people can drink is blood.
It's nasty.
When a lot of people will be sick.
I don't have anything to drink because the blood of a corpse is coagulated.
This isn't the blood.
Well, I
This
know,
is
but-
different than the other one.
But still nasty.
Nasty. Okay, Revelation 16:8.
Then the fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and power was given to him to scorch men with fire.
So this will have many impacts on nature. Talk about global warming.
Yeah.
The glaciers will melt, the seas will rise and flood cities along the coast. Weather patterns will change, more hurricanes. Many people will die, but they won't. The next verse says, and they won't repent and give God the glory. That's the frightening part about that. By this time, well over half the population of the world has died, and they're still not repenting and giving God the glory. That's horrible. Okay, let's read Revelation 16, verses 12 to 14. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and water dried up, and prepared the way for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. For they are demonic spirits performing signs, who go abroad to the kings of the whole world to assemble them for a battle on the great day of the Lord Almighty. This is a gathering of the armies of the world to the battle of Armageddon. And you have a battle like this, again, many, many, many people will die. It talks, and I don't remember where the reference is, but it talks about blood reaching the hocks of horses from this, splashing up their legs to their, I mean, I can't imagine. And then the last one we're going to read from Revelation is Revelation chapter 16, verses 17 to 21.
Okay, the seventh angel poured out his. We got some feedback if someone check your stuff. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder and a great earthquake, such as there's never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nation fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of wine from the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found. And great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people. And they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. Backwards.
This is, I don't think that movie makers have even dreamt of something. What an earthquake. It says that the cities of the nations fell. In the modern cities that we have today, all the high-rise buildings and so forth, you have an earthquake like that, they're going to be flat. All those buildings are going to be flat.
Well, yeah.
And it says that every island is going to be gone. That's amazing. I wonder if Australia is concerned. No, it's a continent, isn't it?
Still an island.
Every island will be gone. All the mountains will collapse.
Ararat.
All the big mountains, Everest and so forth, are going to be flat.
Denali.
They're going to be flat. Oh my
To have that happen would require all the plates of the earth to just crumble and fall.
Yeah.
And fall down.
Yeah, and then it says to accompany that, it's going to be 100-pound hailstones. Have you ever been in a hailstorm when they're big stones? When we lived in Texas, when we first got married, we had a storm and we had big hailstones, big ones. I remember them hitting the roof like like baseballs.
We thought the roof would be gone.
We thought the roof would be destroyed. Fortunately, it was a new house and our car was in the garage. Because all the cars in the car lot down the street, the new car lot, were destroyed.
We're just-
It was horrible. And those are just small 100-pound hailstones.
When you think of a bowling ball, a big bowling ball weighs 18 pounds.
Yeah.
So times 10.
I find interesting too where it makes reference to the flashes of lightning and
Mhm.
thunder before the earthquake. And I saw a clip on the Turkey earthquake where there was lightning, just immense amounts of lightning just before the earthquake.
Wow.
And the same thing with that mountains disappearing. You think about that whole, I mean, having just come from Seattle, that whole coastal, it's nothing but just huge mountains and just, it's got to be plates moving and everything just levels out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, you were also saying, you know, well, they weren't repenting during all this, and we should be baffled by that. But we think of Romans 1, you know, for since the beginning of creation, you know, God and His power and His Godhead, you know, we're without excuse. We're without excuse now, and but yet God's power is visible to us. You know, I mean, we ought to be able to see it.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
Isaiah 24:1 says that God will twist its surface in the ESV anyway. Talks about it. He will twist the surface of the earth. Well, this bowl judgment certainly that's certainly what's going to happen. That's a very good description of what's going to happen in that bowl judgment. It's going to twist the surface of the earth. And verse 2 of 24:1, where it talks about servant and master and so forth, basically it's saying all types of people, whether you're rich or poor, no matter what position, all those people are going to be impacted by this judgment. All people.
Money won't stop.
It's almost like a premonition of, or just a small glimpse. It talks also about the pestilence, and we think, oh, that, you know, that's never happened. Like, but we've gone through just a hint of it, and just like the earthquakes now, and all these things that are happening, it's wake up, people. This is
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
But
And
it shows the
power of God, doesn't it?
and the ability of that to happen, and what it's really going to look like.
There have been
Yeah.
2 times that I thought exactly people, I thought, you don't see that this is God's hand. You need to be looking up here. Was when St. Helens went off and the back of the mountain blew instead of the front. And it wouldn't have mattered which way. It could have gone either way. If the front had gone, it would have gone straight to Portland. Not Portland, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, Portland.
Puyallup.
No, not Portland and Vancouver. It could
No.
have gone.
Yeah.
It
St.
might have
Helens?
missed it, but yeah, it's in that general vicinity.
It went to the east and instead of to the south. It could have easily
Yeah.
gone to the south, and that would have been devastating on Portland and Vancouver. And
Yeah.
New Orleans, that doesn't have a really good reputation for their morals, they got blasted to smithereens with that hurricane, Katrina, and nothing changed. How they behave at Mardi Gras and
Yep.
stuff like that, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, I've been looking up someplace.
Yeah. Well, let me get back to Isaiah chapter 24, verse 5 and 6. I'm going to read it for the sake of time because I'm really kind of out of time. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants.
That's true.
I got that highlighted in mine. For they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for their guilt. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men are left.
Wow.
Creation is under the curse of sin. Romans chapter 8, verses 19 to 22. I'm going to read it. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. These two passages are totally in sync.
Yeah.
the earth has been defiled by man's sin. And so when God finishes judging mankind, most of the people of the earth will be dead, and the ones who are left will be few. However, we do know from Zechariah's prophecies that 1/3 of the Jews that go into the period of judgment will survive the period of judgment. 2/3 will die, 1/3 will survive. So there are going to be survivors, but they're not going to be a lot. It may be a higher percentage of Jewish survivors than anybody else. We just don't know. I have more notes to talk about, but I'm going to stop it and we'll pick those up next week. I was going to get into Isaiah 25, and I'm going to read it and then we'll talk about it next week. How about that? Isaiah 25 verses 6 through 8. Because I love this passage, because right on the heels of this passage about all this judgment, and then it says, on this mountain, the mountain being Jerusalem, the Lord of hosts will make for all the peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined. And he will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples and the veil that is spread over all the nations. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces, and the reproach of his people he will take away from the earth, for the Lord has spoken. What a beautiful bookends to the two prophecies, one about great judgment and one about great blessing. We did the judgment today. Next week we'll do about blessing and look at some other passages in going forward. But that when I kept reading in Isaiah after reading chapter 24, I thought, I got into chapter 25 and I read these verses and I thought, oh, that's too good not to talk about. That's too good not to talk about. So now you know a little bit about what we're going to look at next week. Any comments or questions?
We always have hope.
Yeah, I know that this is
Thank you for the hope at the end of this.
Yeah,
I know it's kind of a downer.
you don't want to go through it, but
we don't.
hopefully the resurrect. I mean the
rapture
will happen.
Well, it all
before
shows
the
that we have
wrath of God.
It all shows we have a righteous God.
It does. Well, think about what happened with the flood.
Yeah.
Think about what happened with the flood. God looked at it and it says every thought of their heart was only evil all the time. Horrible.
Yeah.
And God judged them and they all died, including the animals of the earth that breathed
Which
air.
is, it talks about groaning under sin.
Yeah. All the animals are impacted by that. So when God judges, he judges. His judgments don't last forever, but they're very, very severe. They're very, very
Until
severe.
that last judgment, that'll be forever.
That's right.
I find it interesting too, in our day, they talk about all these things happening on Earth as global warming. Can we call it sin? Can we call it death? It's already we're still trying to rewrite and get away from the fact that sin is still here.
Yeah, and the thing that I will remind us, based upon our session from last week when we talked about Tyre and how God had arranged for Tyre to be the grocery store for Israel and for Jerusalem and Judah when they were rebuilding Jerusalem. God is orchestrating those kind of things, preparing the way for this period of judgment, and he's doing that. And I don't know what he's doing. We're too close to it. It's hard for us to see it, but we don't have to worry about it. God's got it. And you know what? He's got us. He has us. If we put our trust in Jesus, and I know that all of us, at least on this screen, we've all put our trust in Jesus. People, if you're watching on YouTube and you're listening to this for the first time and you've never put your faith in Jesus Christ as your Savior and Lord, judgment's coming. But if you put your trust in Jesus Christ, He's got you. He's going to take care of you. He is going to take care of you. And that gives me great hope. Yeah, this is hard to study. It's hard to study. It's hard to see. It's hard to even imagine what God's going to do to judge the world. But He's not judging us. He's judging people that have not put their trust in Him. And you know what? God doesn't get any joy from it. God doesn't get His jollies from judging people. In fact, there are verses that say that God groans. He grieves for people that He has to judge. He doesn't like it, but He has to do it because He's righteous and He's just.
Second Peter, He's patient with us. He wants us all to come to repentance.
Not willing.
Why in the world has He waited 2,000 years, almost 2,000
Yeah.
years for the judgment to come since Jesus' resurrection? I don't know. The only reason I can ever think about is that He doesn't want anyone to perish. He wants everyone to come to a state of repentance and put their trust in Him as their Savior, because Jesus died on the cross and paid the penalty for our sins. There's nothing better than that. There's nothing. And then He adopts us into His family. So yeah, we have great hope. But if you have never put your trust in Jesus, there's no hope. In fact, it's a negative hope.
And it's not like He's doing it blindly. I mean, he says that, he's reaching out, and that all the world, everyone will have an opportunity
There's
to accept or reject.
There's plenty of opportunity right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. I'm going to stop the recording now.